Dakwaan mengenai 13 Menteri Kabinet didapati positif COVID-19 adalah berita palsu.
Sebanyak 85 kes berita palsu sedang disiasat. Saya sendiri pun menjadi mangsa kepada penyebaran berita palsu.
%43% rakyat Malaysia adalah pemuda. Kita perlu mulakan pelajaran untuk media literasi dari muda. Jika kita mengajar satu pemuda, kita hanya mengajar satu pemuda. Tetapi dengan pendidik, kita boleh mengajar satu generasi anak murid.
When I see my students, a lot of them are innocent. They will believe everything that is online. That's why they need to education to know, okay, which one they can follow, which one they cannot, and learn how to filter.
For the teachers that are here, you have a unique opportunity to engage with them about media literacy that sometimes journalists don't even have. We get 3 minutes on Facebook, but you guys get to constantly reinforce a message.
Suasana bilik darjah tersebut adalah suasana yang terbaik bagi saya untuk mempelajari sesuatu, dan apabila kita menginstitusikan pengajian berkenaan dengan media, berkenaan dengan bagaimana kita membaca sesuatu berita, mendapatkan maklumat di atas internet, saya kira ini akan menjadikan pelajar tersebut ada struktur di situ yang mudah mereka fahami.
I think media literacy is really important because our students are all on social media, and that is quite an uncontrolled medium of news. This is something that's really crucial for this time and age for our students.
Handphone dah ada kat tangan masing-masing. Kita ada access to internet 24 jam. Bila lagi kalau bukan sekarang untuk kita educate orang ramai ataupun rakyat Malaysia yang tercinta ni tentang media literacy.
As a teacher, you have to teach them more than just your subject. You have to get them ready to be able to live and to function well in our society. For me personally, it's a really meaningful initiative to be a part of.
InsyaAllah saya yakin kalau rakyat Malaysia semua mempunyai media literacy skill, kemahiran yang lebih tinggi, InsyaAllah Malaysia akan jadi lebih maju, lebih harmoni, lebih aman damai dan lebih sensitif dengan apa yang ada dekat sekeliling mereka.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome. My name is Jason Wee and I'm the co-founder of Architects of Diversity Malaysia. I'll be hosting our panel today as your moderator. Today's panel is brought to you by Media Education for All, or ME4A, an initiative run by educators all over Malaysia in conjunction with Global Media and Information Literacy Week by UNESCO. We're here to spread awareness on the importance of media and information literacy for the public, especially educators and students. You are tuning in to Representation of Malaysian Indians in the Media, where we'll be discussing media representation on race and culture that contribute to stereotypes among minorities. While certainly not new, the Malaysian Indian community, while recognizing there are many different identities held within the Indian label, has and continues to face discrimination both at the interpersonal and cultural level. Most recently, we saw a racial slur being used against our national women's single badminton player, Eskisona, that prompted wide reactions all the way from our politicians to Facebook comment sections. Various other incidents such as Foodpanda's Bollywood-themed ad and Ikram's Merdeka Day ad surrounding the K-word have really pushed the question of representation and inclusion of the Indian community into the limelight. As the public is catching up to the reality of the lived experiences of Indian Malaysians, interrogation into this topic is long overdue. Today, we are joined by three great panelists. First, we have Yuswari. Yuswari comes from 13 years of industry experience as a journalist, having worked with some of the top news agencies in the nation, the New Straits Times, the Malaysian Insider, and the Rakyat Post before joining the Malay Mail, where she currently serves as its senior correspondent. She's also a recipient of the Journalism for an Equitable Asia's Merit Award from the Asia Center and Oxfam in Asia. Welcome, Iswari.
Hello, Jason. Thank you
Next.
for the introduction. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Iswari. Next, we have Ron Jaturai. Ron is Unmuted's head researcher and content consultant and is a non-binary queer educator who identifies with the pronouns he, they. His areas of research include narratives on post-coloniality and its relationship to racism, genders, and sexualities of the Indian diaspora. Ron currently lectures literary critical theory units with Monash University, Malaysia. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Jason. Such an honor.
All right. And last but not least, we have Pravin. Pravin Balakrishnan is currently a teacher in Malaysia. He was a Fulbright scholar at Loyola University of Chicago, graduating with a master's in cultural and education policy studies in 2019. His research interests include education for sustainable development, international large-scale assessments, and public-private partnerships in education. Welcome, Pravin.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for the introduction. Glad to be here.
All right. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'd like to get this discussion started with a general question, and perhaps Iswari, you could take this first. So we know that race has permeated and continues to permeate in our daily lives in Malaysia. And in your opinion, how has race played a role in our media and news reports? And more specifically, how do you think the media has treated the Indian community in Malaysia?
Well, hi again, Jason. Hello, Ron and Pravin. So you see, this question about representation has been there for a while. Basically, what changes can happen, with more Indians being in the local media industry. As you can see, and as you had mentioned in several of the examples, there appears to still be some sort of an ignorance, sometimes to quite, in my opinion, it's a bit of a dizzying height, because you just go like, if it's someone who's not familiar with the cultures of the ethnic Indians here, then perhaps it would not be so much of an issue because we can educate. But when it comes from people who have had friends and family members who are Indians, it begs the question as to what went wrong, or what type of understanding do they have about the ethnic Indians in the industry. So which is why having a good ratio of representation in our media industry is important to address the issues. Like perhaps someone who is non-Indian may think, what is the big deal about that Food Panda ad, right? It's nothing unusual. Or perhaps the Ikram ad that you mentioned, I had in fact some Indians were saying, I don't find it to be offensive. What's happening is true. So they were just highlighting it. But it all boils down to the context of things. Context is everything. So when it hits a raw nerve, everything goes helter-skelter, because the thing is, people are still angry, okay? Being marginalized for so many years, it's not easy to accept advertisements like that. For some people it's very bitter. It brings about bad memories. I've had my share of being called the K word, when I was much younger. So I look at it from a different perspective. Let us also not forget there is the economic background to play here too. There are Indians who come from the lower rung. There are Indians who are middle class. There are Indians who are well off. So our experiences are not always the same, which is why debates on topics like this are very important. And which is why representation of Indians in the media industry is also important, because it is where the point of awareness starts. Otherwise, it's like, well, nobody is telling us anything. Nobody's making any noise. Nobody who's from that community is saying anything. So what can go wrong? So this is what starts the problem usually.
Right. Thanks, Iswari. And for Ron, we all know, there have been attempts of representing Indian Malaysians in our media. What do you think that the media is getting right, if any, or wrong when it comes to representation of minorities in the media?
It's a very loaded question. I think there are many ways to dissect. I think specifically, I think Malaysia does try to platform Indians Like it's basically a homogenized term, right? Indian, and we all know. In fact, most of us from academia know that the word Indian itself is very problematic. It's actually a nationality. Even India itself is so diverse with multi ethnic communities, which are also ethno-linguistic based, right? The Malayalis, Malayalam, Tamils with Tamil, and Kannada with Kannada. So we have that differentiation, but in Malaysia, everybody is just lumped up as Indian. So I think when private companies or even mainstream media sectors, when they're trying to pick Indian, it's like putting your hand in a basket, blindfolded, and you're just picking someone out. And that person could be representing another community, and then other people will feel misunderstood and misrepresented, right? So I think a lot of criticality needs to go in when they are doing such searches for talent, especially. Let's not even start with gender. Like, we don't really see many Indian or Tamil dark-skinned women facing and doing like front stream journalism work, except for now we see Nandini Balakrishnan taking in a lot. And when she does say something, people suddenly seem to understand and listen, when this should have happened 20 years ago, you know. But Nandini Balakrishnan is ushering a new era of outspoken Indian women who are not just loud in the household where people don't take them seriously, but right on the platform. So I see that as coming up. So I hope there's probably, like, you know, more representation from the queer community, people who are non-binary, things like that. I think that would encourage more. Yeah, but otherwise, I think Yusuri has sort of like answered everything about, you know, the problems with media representation and how it leads to stereotypes. And I like that she said something about we have been multiply marginalized over the years. And it's amazing that there are still people who don't believe that this is something real. They believe it's something that we have made up in our minds. And I think that's something we need to address. Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. And let's hop on quickly to Pravin. And so just one thing add on what Ron said as well, that many people don't accept this as a reality for many Malaysians. How do you think education has contributed to this, especially in terms of how our students perceive and consume stereotypes about different races and minorities in Malaysia?
Okay, thanks, Jason. First off, really good points and insights from Yusri and Ron. I really can understand when Ron said that Indians are all just lumped together, and I think that is a big problems that Indians face as a community. Um, I think I think if you really want to define an Indian, I think the spectrum would be like a dark-skinned Indian and a light-skinned Indian. I think that would be the better way to define Indians as well. But okay, coming back to the question that you asked me, Jason, coming back to education. So I'm a teacher in Terengganu. So Terengganu is pretty much a homogeneous place. It's I don't know the statistics, but I'm looking at like 80% of them are Malays. So I just want to share a quick story here. So I get posted in 2014 as a teacher. I go into the class, I do my job. I think I'm a pretty good teacher. So I overheard one of the teachers was saying this to her students. She was saying, yeah, Sir Pravin is a good teacher, you know, but end of the day he's a cafe. And this was a teacher telling to the students. So how are Indians represented in education? I think we are. It's the stereotypes continue to exist in education, and I don't think there's enough efforts or active efforts being done to combat this, and it just keeps perpetuating. So that is one of the biggest challenges I think that we face as a country when it comes to education and the way we address minorities. So I go in there as a teacher, but I still get called as a cafe and also as a keling. But this has changed over the years, because end of the day, my students see me as a human after I work with them for some months, and then, you know, all those stereotypes which is there in their head, it gets broken down, and then they have they're able to see a person as a person and not based on their race. So I think our education system, we have a long way to go, but there's definitely hope. I think, yeah, that's all, Jason, for now.
Thanks, Pravin. And for the speakers, do feel free to, let me know if you'd like to respond to another speaker as well. I kind of want to hop on that, just hold down this concept of stereotypes and how it's perpetuated first. So we know that perhaps our education has gaps in addressing these stereotypes. And I kind of quickly jump back to you, Swari, with asking, how do you think, these stereotypes have affected how media producers have essentially create their media and perhaps might lead to inaccuracies in the media, in your opinion?
I guess you see, when you do not have fair representation of the people who understand the issues because they actually faced and came out from those situations, then it leads to some sort of probably people think, it's a utopia setting where everything is okay because they are not speaking, they're not saying anything, so it should be okay. You see, my personal experience as a journalist, when I went for a field assignment, a particular minister was not happy because I am of a particular race and asking a question linked to Islam. That is also because of a lot of things are reported. It was not really a complicated topic, which I am not, which is not something I would say I do not understand properly. It is something I have read about, I have understood. Like I said, if you stay in Malaysia, you like it or not, you are exposed to many issues, many types of perspectives. So you learn and you assimilate and you understand. So he was trying to ignore me. And it seems very forced. When he answered me, he just wanted to go away, and I was holding him down, pressing him with more questions. And I remember another journalist, I can't really remember if it's a journalist or someone from the media or someone who's on his side, actually came up to me and said, well, don't you know how to read someone's body language? He was obviously not happy with you asking the question. Not like you asking the question, so you just know why. So, and then this kind of mentality actually also adds into the stereotypes about Indians, like, hey, they're questioning things which they should not. I really think that is a very bad start, and that's when we go down on a slippery slope. We stay in a multicultural, multinational, multi-ethnic society. To me, I do expect those of other races to know to a certain extent what is the type of problem afflicting other communities. So this is when the issue of stereotype which you brought up about Jason, this is also when it becomes a bit of a problem. Now, sometimes you see, you are actually taught, or it's my personal belief, and it's a professional belief, that when you have a certain political leaning, you keep it to yourself and you do not project it on your work. Your work has to be objective. Your work has to abide by the 5 Ws and 1 H of journalism, the ethics. That's the most important thing. But we do have issues of people also, their writings are very leaned towards a certain political understanding. And that's when a lot of misunderstandings and stereotypes come, because they just do not understand the topic enough, and because they are misguided by certain political leanings. And so the writing becomes very biased, and it's not thorough. So for people like for people from the ethnic Indian communities, when they read such things, they'll be like, this, there's so much inaccuracy. Where don't they have any Indians to correct them? Why is this being written this way? So this is the problem. And another thing, you must also know that as it stands, we do not have much Tamil. Mostly it's Tamil publications right now. You have the age-old Tamil Nation and all of that, but there has been a handful of Tamil news portals which have come up, which are being run by a really dynamic young journalists. But it needs time, because this is what happens. People are so used to the Tamil media being in a certain setting, just the newspaper and nothing else. And then, you flip it, it's always the entertainment news which you read 5 days ago. Why are they, publishing it again and in full color pages, which costs a lot of money? And so now, because of that kind of, there's not been much shift in the Tamil media scene, so people are already stuck to that stereotype. If it's Tamil paper, it's just these three papers. They do not look beyond and see, is there something new that has come? So efforts are being done by the younger journalists now, but it needs a lot of time for them to come out and outshine, mainly because of the stereotypes that's holding back, because people have already formed a certain opinion about Tamil papers or Tamil content. So it makes it a little bit harder than, when you're with the English or a Malay publication, which receives more traction from the public. So, yeah.
Thanks, Iswari. And I think that's such a succinct way of putting it, that there's really a lacking of space, right, for, I think, the minority Indian community in Malaysia to use the language and to discuss the issues as well that are pertinent, or even just reclaiming yourself in the mainstream space as well. I kind of want to quickly jump over to Ron, and I want to kind of pick your thoughts about why do you think this is the case that Indian Malaysians have to fight for space and, just being a place of belonging in the media? Why do you think that that's the case, and how did we get here?
Okay, wow. I actually wanted to chime in with both Praveen and Yusri just now, but my mind was like trying to form thoughts. I think I'll sort of respond it here. I think all that Praveen is talking about, the experience in school, both as a student, as a former student, we all went through school. So the experiences we had being a super minority and then becoming an educator, because Praveen teaches in a school, I'm in a university. So I see things very differently. And then I also had journalism experience with the Star, so I can understand what Yusri is saying. So when I put all this together, I think that one of the biggest problems, or shall I just say that the cancer is, I'm going to relate this to a concept called anti-blackness. And it is the Tamil community that has been completely sidelined by the global Western academic lenses, that they do not understand that Tamil people are actually very traumatized and injured people, both in mind and body, throughout colonial history, from the issues and invasions in Sri Lanka to the diaspora outside, and also through the colonial transportation of human labor post-slavery, or what Indian sociologists will say quasi-slavery, and their existence today on this land. So it feels like we have turned our oppressors have never left us. It was from the caste oppressed system of India or Sri Lanka, and then we move on to a white colonial oppressor, and then now that white oppressor has been replaced by powers that be that I should not name, because we have all sorts of akta sakit hatis happening. So what I'm trying to say is that we have never been fully liberated. And when I speak to Tamil people, Malaysian Indians, let's put it in that sense, who have moved overseas, they seem to sound and think very liberally and critically. And one of the reasons why is that because they have the space to do so. And when I interrogate why is this space so important, is because sense of belonging. Many of us do not have a sense of belonging. We are always walking on eggshells because we are afraid of the majorities. There's this ingrained fear. And so much so for people who are the ones who are colonizing us in that sense today, view us from a very microscopical lens, but also use stereotypes to build onto that meaning. Yeah. Isri, you wanted to say something?
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so yeah, like Ron, what Ron said is accurate. The concept of being oppressed, and how when the indentured laborers came here. Actually, if you look at history, a lot of these Tamil papers, and actually the Indian papers which started at that time, had a very nationalistic tone. They were teaching people how to stand up, and if you just look back, there were quite a few. There were even some Punjabi genre publications as well. They came up as a form of them being as a result of oppression, to just rise up. So now the situation we have, it's not as extreme, of course. Things have changed over decades, but we are still being told what type of questions, or maybe it's like an ingrained understanding in you, because you have to be very careful, as Ron highlighted. When you are with being under powers that be, this another is always another concern. So you have to make sure you don't you do your work at the same time, you don't trip on anyone. So and the type of colonialism that happens now is like, know your place. When you ask certain questions, please you need to know where you're coming from. Is it not the publication, but it's like, is it appropriate for you? Again, I stress on the you asking this question, or is it better for your Malay friend to ask that question, or your Chinese friend to ask that question? There's always this concept of appropriateness going around when it comes to certain type of questions. So because I have personally received threats and everything because of the type of questions I asked, and always the usual issue people have is because of my race. What does she know? How can she ask these questions? It's always a very common criticism that I get. Not really the focus on the context, and the hatred actually drowns people who actually try to highlight the context of the question that was being asked. And people are just more like, how can she ask such a question? It's always that thing. So while, like Ron pointed out, we have overcome. So we have overcome oppression in so many ways, but to a certain extent some of us still have that fear, to be very honest. We still have that fear when we want to ask certain questions. And because being in the industry, I know, because we always we will talk, do you want to take that question? I will take this question, it seems more appropriate, so we can all cover our ground and we don't have to get into any issues, you see. So yeah, this is something that's happening. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sorry, I just wanted to add on. I think it's really accurate because I call it the disembodying genesis, as in, I feel like a lot of Indians have to separate themselves. We have dual consciousness. One is to exist within the state, and the second is to be global citizens. And when we do this balancing, this is why many of us inherit intergenerational trauma and also diseases, and we carry this trauma with us throughout. So even in schools, like what Pravin said, I have been called, everyone will have a story to say. This is the beautiful thing. You can interview every Malaysian Indian and we will all have a story. And this is also going back to the criticism of whether vernacular schools are relevant and why some people want it to be gone, and why is there an emphasis on fully national school? Because I personally believe national schools are also deeply polarized. I've seen divisions everywhere, from the assembly line to the canteen. So I think the best thing is that it is so ingrained that something major, like a complete overhaul in education, needs to happen, because I believe children are the only ones who can change it. Adults, once you're 18 and above, I feel like a lot of these beliefs have been set in, and any further changes to happen has to come from their initiative, which is going to be difficult. Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. And I want to quick pass the ball to Pravin, because I think we're talking about this place where a lot of parts where Indian participation in the media is inherited, where, again, just to use the phrase, walking on eggshells, there's a sense of fear. Pravin, how do you think this fear has been inculcated within the education system, if any? And perhaps what do you think needs to be done to ensure that voices are translated to the media well?
Okay, but before I attempt to give my insight on that, I just want to point back to what Ron and Yusri said. I think the Malaysian Indian community has definitely been traumatized and all that. And I think all of that can always go back to two things lah: capitalism and colonialism. I think I read this somewhere. Like when Indians were brought to Malaysia, it was very structured. The Punjabis were brought for a certain reason. The Tamils were brought for a certain reason. The Malayalis were brought for a certain reason, and the Telungus were also brought for a certain reason. So, like each community were brought in to do a certain social activity, and I think that has continued until now. And we are at a point where there is some liberation, like what Ron said, but it is not a full liberation where we are able to completely identify with ourselves. And when it comes to education, what's happening is we have, especially students who go to Tamil schools for primary schools, when they go to secondary schools, they they feel very left out. And this comes back to the sense of belonging which Ron mentioned. And they do not have a sense of belonging to the school. They do not have a sense of belonging to their to education itself, because they are moving away from Tamil education to Malay or English education, and they have a lot of problems with overcoming that. And I think one of a really good movie that Malaysians should watch is Jagat. I think most people would have watched the film. Jagat by Sanjay Kumar Perumal. It's a Malaysian film, and I think the film really touches on it touches a little bit on education, but also touches on the life of Indians generally when they left the estates and they went to urban spaces. They couldn't find the connection, and they really struggle to move forward. And I think what we are having, the biggest thing that is handicapping us is not just the system, the broader social context that we are in, but also we cannot find a sense of belonging. And once we can't find a sense of belonging within Malaysia itself, we try to find it externally. And I think that is where we are struggling to move forward as a community. That's why the Indian community is so fragmented. That is why you have situations where English-speaking urban Indian will not relate himself to a Tamil-speaking Indian. And that's the biggest struggles that we are facing as a community ourselves. We are having that kind of issues. I think it's the same for the Chinese community as well. I think it's the same for Malays as well. But with Indians, it's more prominent. Okay, that's all my sharing for now, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Pravin. And Ron, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's also based on a lot of colorism and casteism. Like a lot of people say that Malaysian Indians are caste blind, and it only comes up in weddings. Like when you have an arranged marriage, people ask you questions about your village and all that. But I also think that it's very prominent. Like, please tell me one MIC leader who is not of upper caste. So even in institutional political structures, we have this a form of ignorance towards the visibility of caste. And this is completely true because, as what Pravin said, caste is also influenced by capitalist economics and, yeah, I was going to say Marxist, but you get what I'm trying to say. Because we have been assigned economic value, our bodies have been commodified. And because of that, people take things and people differently as how serious you could take them. Like dark-skinned Indians are always considered labor class, and therefore they're taken seriously. And we see this in histories of colorism, and how this is so reflected in the whole BLM movement. Because I hate to draw the parallels between Black America, Black Britain, and Malaysia, because we are not Black. But it's interesting to use lenses to investigate critical race theory and use it here. I completely believe that we need to and encourage more researchers or even teachers to read history and narratives from the mainstream in that lens to liberate, people who have been oppressed and marginalized. Yeah, that's all I just wanted to add.
All right, thanks, Ron. We have a question coming in from the audience. We have a question that reads, how can we correct/be aware of our biases when we consume the media? And I think this is a great question, given that, the situation is definitely fraught and it's built up by the media as well. And to kind of pivot back into the question of media, I guess watching here today, we have educators, we have members of the education community. So what steps do you think should be taught in order for individuals and the public to make sure that where our attention is at is helpful to correct our biases today? Maybe perhaps Iswari, you could take this one first.
So you see that's why it boils down to the point of education. It's as a media person myself, I am of course always required to continue researching, continue reading, continue improving my knowledge of things. In this day and age, the wave of political correctness has hit us from all angles, and that in some ways has, of course there's pros and cons to that, but when you talk about the the good sides of it is that it has helped to address these issues faced by the minorities. So, it has helped to somewhat create an awareness among people that what you say or how you say it, the context that you put things in matters. So I would suggest, everyone, it's the same thing that I've been telling to anyone. What you read, okay, you go and you check back. You can always check back the facts. You can always check back on research papers, which is something I do when I have free time, after work, to learn more about how these issues came about. It would only make you better. It would only make your awareness on things broader, and you would tend to, you would be more aware of things. So if you just take everything served to you and you consume it just the way that it is, then you're just bound to be stuck in that particular angle, in that particular narratives, because you must also understand now the media scene in Malaysia globally, it has changed. Now it's the online culture. Malay Mail, we used to have our paper, but we shut it down 3 years ago and we are fully online. And a lot of people are moving in that direction, but we also have competitions in the form of blogs. So blogs are just so easy to form. You don't have to go and do any registration, you're just there. And then there is a lot of spinning is the biggest enemy that we are facing right now, because a lot of our content, which we have done with a lot of hard work and research, some other blogs, they just take it, they just spin it, and then it becomes a problem when people start sharing content from those blogs and they do not actually go and check other news portals, other proper news portals, has this issue been reported. And then you get all these biased views coming, and then people start sharing all these unverified things. And of course, we know how fake news comes about. So, and this actually creates a lot of tension. I do not want to mention some controversial cases that has touched on a raw nerve. I think we all know, one of the most, infamous one that has caused a lot of issues. And there have been so many theories flying around. Some blogs came about, and some, unknown NGOs started coming and claiming that they champion for these issues. And people started getting drawn into all this. And these content started in some way drowning proper content which was done by media houses by way of research, by talking to authorities and putting things up out there. So when tension runs high, this becomes an issue. So we need a calm mind when you read something, even if it gives you a lot of, even if it gives you high pressure. I suggest you go and cross-check what is being reported by other news portals, what is being said. Because, there are so many ways for you to cross-check these days. So you can use so many resources. The internet is limitless. Of course, again, it has its pros and cons, but if you want to use it for the greater good, it's always there. So, yeah.
All right, thanks, Iswari. And that's a great point. And especially when tensions are high is oftentimes when we're prone to mistakes the most. I want to quickly jump to Pravin.
Sorry, Jason, I must also say that, we also get caught in the crossfire a lot. When a certain case was happening, particularly, I would have to mention, the Adib's case, when, the nation was shook by what happened. I would be lying if, some of us were not afraid for our safety, because when we go into a group of crowd, like just say there's a protest demanding justice for Adib and all. So when someone like me, I go there, you can sense that there is tension towards me because of where I come from and what happened. So when these things happen, you definitely need a cool mind, and you definitely need a lot of calm, because you don't want to, as a journalist, being emotional is your worst enemy. And and also there's always this thing, you never become the story. You go there and you write the story, you don't become the headline. So a lot of things happen when issues of national importance happens. Some of us, because of the context of the things that happen, we also tend to become victims in some ways, victims of the situation. So, yeah.
For sure. And I guess the harm is very hard to control when it's spread across TikTok comments, Facebook comments. It spreads like wildfire, and it's really hard to monitor and even just know the magnitude of it sometimes. And I want to jump to Pravin, because I think especially in the age of social media, where our young and our kids are engaging with media left, right, center, And what Iswaris mentioned that, there's a lot of gaps in terms of how we could correct our biases. Do you think our students are ready or are engaging well? And what do you think teachers today could possibly do in their classrooms to address this?
Okay, so I would definitely say like my students, if my students are very engaged in social media, they know all the latest happenings, and um, actually like most of the national issues, they are aware about it. They know what's going on, and they know what kind of racial issues are going on. They are aware, but they are not like what Ron said earlier. I mean, up until the age of 18, they are still formulating their own thoughts and opinions. So this nothing has been concretized yet. So teachers play a very very big role here. Like if say a teacher goes and say to a student who's like 16 years old, like all Chinese are racist or all Indians are gangsters, and the 16-year-old kid who can be very much influenced will have those thoughts become reified, and that becomes their reality. So teachers play a very big role here in like challenging those negative things which students come across in social media. And most of these trolls that you see in social media, it is meant to divide the nation so that the oppressors can remain in power. So I think this is very important. And but what I also want to mention here that I definitely see some of my students, like I think the future, there's a lot of hope in it because they are able to see past these stereotypes. I think we got it right in the beginning. Like someone did mention this in the comment, like in the 1950s, 60s, I think we got it right. I think in the 60s to 80s, something went terribly wrong in the education system. I think we can go back and check what went wrong. 60s to 80s, I think something went really bad. So now things are getting a little bit better, and I think social media is helping that conversations to take place. But at the same time, it's like a double-edged sword. Like they're also exposed to things at a very young age. So I think teachers play a big role here. Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Praveen. I'm going to jump to Ron. Ron, what do you have anything to add to this? And I think from your perspective, I'm curious to know what do you think needs to be done in order to address gaps in kind of media literacy, especially pointing out inaccurate stereotypes, false stereotypes, or even harmful stereotypes in the media?
I want to say abolish the whole damn thing. I think there's so much work to be done. It needs to be abolished. It needs to be overhauled. That is idealism, right? I think a lot of us, I'm just saying us as the collective term, we like to look up to how systems of governance, policies, laws, media, education work in developed countries. Yeah, let's put it that way. It could be any regional scale. And see how it happens. So I'm a big proponent for the freedom of speech. I love it when people say, if you want to say racist things, go ahead. It's just a reflection of you, sis. It's just you, and it's good that you're airing it out there. But when we say something bad, then don't use those same laws against us. So this is what I'm trying to say. I think we lack a lot of minority protection. A lot of the time, it's the majoritarian bullying, and it gets away. But when a minority speaks out and says something, it will be completely turned and made it seem like, we are the instigators of the nation, and, we get thrown into prisons where we are even denied legal representation. And I think, it happened, and it happens. So I think I want to say an overhaul, and I also maybe want to play a card a little bit on politics. So maybe we really need a lot of younger Malaysians to come in, because when you are young, we all grow up on social media. Your peers will call you out if you say something problematic. Accountability is so important. Old politicians, I'm going to be ageist here, forgive me. Anyone more than 50 years old sitting in parliament have no accountability. Even if they do it because they just want to get their votes. But on social media, they don't even care about the people who are in their constituency and people on the national scale. But I think if there is a possibility for Muda to come in, I think that would be great, because young people are more receptive to criticism and they are willing to do the work. In fact, many of them have done the work in varsity. Many of them are educated. And I don't like using education as the benchmark, but I feel that once you have achieved a higher learning capacity, you are willing to listen. I think there's a lot of blocking happening with people who are older and those who are involved in policy making who are much older. So I'm all for young blood, and I also want critical thinkers. So it's not just all young, but you have to be very critical. I think once we achieve that, we can repeal laws that are actually putting us down. So that's my hope, because if not, we're going to be we'll be talking about the same thing in 5 years' time. What are the stereotypes? What can we do? What is media doing? What can happen in schools? Whatever Praveen is saying happened in 1998 when I was in Standard 1. It happens in 2004 when I went to secondary school. And when I finished and went into upper six, it's the same thing. And of course, there are differences, right, in how things have been communicated over the years, but the structure is still there, So it's a little bit pessimistic to say that, but I'm also optimistic that we need the younger generations to come into political activism as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. And I think the point about younger people being more open to criticism and being held accountable is such an interesting point. And I'm on that point as well. I'm curious to know from you, Swari, do you think that media practitioners are receptive to criticisms, especially when it comes to Indian representation in the media? And if they're not, how do we get them to be?
Receptive to criticism and Indian representation in the media, what exactly do you mean, Jason?
For example, like will it be correcting, willing to admit faults within their representation if they make mistakes? Yeah.
Well, definitely. I do sense and I do see that, because when you are in this industry, it's all about facts and it's all about getting things right, especially when you're writing about community related issues, ethnic relations and whatnot. You really have to get it right. You need to understand the sentiments. You need to understand what type of sense of oppression are they feeling and why are they feeling this way after all these years. There are some going about saying it's been over 60 years and you're all feeling all this hatred. Why? You see, the problem is a lot of people are still left out, and that is an undeniable fact. And a lot of anger builds up because you're not given that access that others have, and many of them, they just want to get an education and break free from what they are facing. So they look up to people like Praveen, Ron, and me in the media to continue to voice and highlight these issues in a very factual and contextual manner. Because a lot of people always say things like, oh, you're very emotional. Some of y'all are just too emotional. I know a lot of people like to use the word Indians are just too emotional. Well, why are they emotional? Why do some of them, maybe not all, of course, I'm very calm, but why did that come about? So it's the anger, when you look at it, it always relates back to the type of oppression they face, the marginalized lives they have. So they feel helpless in that way, so which is why when people like us, we come into the media scene, there is a lot of hope that we would continue to highlight, and by way of us writing about it, talking about it, that they can get some reprieve in the form of change, in the form of better policies. So these are how, there is a certain burden of responsibility on ethnic Indians or Indians. Okay, let's just not ethnic Indians alone. Indians who are in the media, you will always get someone saying, please do try to talk about these issues more. People think everything's fine, but it's not. So your presence there is always seen as some sort of a reprieve. You can help. So we need to use that platform well, and which is why, like again, Jason, the question about representation, it is very important. When you come from a marginalized community, voices are not that loud because a lot of people are afraid. They are afraid of speaking up. They are afraid of being penalized for speaking up, So they look at people like us because you've got the license to talk. You are allowed to talk. So you can talk for us and help. So this is how it's being viewed. Which is why, all these ads, when they come up, a lot of us, I've got some questions, people calling me up and asking, as a journalist, as an ethnic Indian Tamil journalist, what do you think about this? So you see, it becomes a bit of a burden for me to sit and explain, and for me to also understand why would anyone do certain things that way. I've also got to understand from their perspective what type of sentiment or what type of understanding they have on this community, and why do you feel not happy or why do you feel angry about the way it's portrayed. So you need to understand both sides of things. So yeah.
Just a quick one to add from Yusri. Just a quick one. Sorry. I think Yusri is highlighting something beautiful that everybody here should listen. It is also misogyny. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not just ethnic, but it's also gender. And people don't take Indian women seriously, and this is precisely the problem. Look at the
Yes.
representation of women in parliament. That itself is a good indicator on the kind of policies we are going with and the kind of debates we are expecting. Not talking to elephants and being able to converse in a language does not make you diverse. I think you should listen instead of saying, I can't see you, so put on powder. So little language like this, linguistic differences can really make a difference. So hire more Indian women, please. Take them seriously. Stop saying that we are emotional because that's very tone policing. And as what Praveen and somebody else also said, come for the root of the problem. Why emotional non-verbal gestures and also verbal gestures and intonation? Why is it so important in the way Tamil people speak English or even Malay? It comes from a very long cultural root, and it's so important to understand that we are not angry. This is perhaps sometimes this is the way we speak because we are frustrated. We are trying to make a point. That's all. Of course, when we're angry, there's another thing altogether. But I think it's very important that Malaysians understand this, and we have to stop living a lie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right, Ron. Jason, can I just add a very short point? You see, just a personal experience. When I wanted to do journalism, I was met with a lot of criticism from people in my community. But that is because they were afraid for me. As an Indian woman, as a Tamil woman, you going out there and asking questions. I think you boys, Praveen, sorry, gentlemen, I think Praveen and Ron, you guys will know, they'll always use the term Vayadi. Vayadi means the Tamil for talkative. So they said, you like to talk a lot, yeah, but I think you may not be able to stand in this industry. Might be you might get eaten alive. And another fear that some of them were saying was that you're a woman, you're an Indian woman, you may have to go out with men at night to get stories. This is one of the mentality that was so prevalent, because it was a lot of safety issues. How can you thrive? It's not, do you see our people, many of them are in this industry, where do you think they are today? All these things were being put into my head. But I'm very stubborn and I know what I wanted to do, so I went on and I showed them that some of their fears, or almost all of their fears, are not, it's baseless. But I understand where they come from, because Ron did highlight the issue of caste within the community. That is also another problem which leads to a lot of other problems that we have right now, which also affects representation in certain way. If honestly, Jason, you want to dissect this issue, it goes long and long and long. There's that caste, that subcaste thing going on, and by that way they deny certain representation of certain people. It's a whole line of rubbish politics, and we have to literally fight the system that's inside of us to come out and to outshine, and to show the system outside that, hey, we exist, we need help, we are capable too. So you see, the struggle is double or triple. So it's a lot of issues.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Iswari. Pravin, would you like to add anything before we go to our closing question?
I just want to add, like, real quick, like when Yusri said that the struggle is double or triple, I can resonate with that. But the struggle really is really worth it at the end, because I don't want to say like I made it, but like when I'm up there, I got the Fulbright scholarship. So when I got the scholarship, it kind of gave other Indians like, oh, he did it, no, I can do it too. So that kind of really helped. And Yiswari is a journalist now. There could be a Form 2 girl out there hopes to be a journalist, and she sees Yiswari, and then she can identify herself with Yiswari's name, and then that can inspire her to become a journalist as well. And I think that's why representation is so important. That's it, Jason. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Pravin. Right. So we do have a last question from the audience, and we're going to use it as our closing question since we're almost out of time. So, what can we do as a society, country, broadly to address misrepresentation of race, especially those of the minority in the media. So kind of to wrapping up our session today, kind of your kind of farewell words, what do you want to emphasize, summarizing the discussion today? Perhaps we can go Iswari first.
The key word here, Jason, is like how we all have highlighted, the root is always acknowledgement. We need to first acknowledge that these problems exist or these issues exist for us to be able to address this issue of misrepresentation. Sweeping it under the carpet or making it a fodder for advertisements are not going to help. And thinking that you're doing a favor by highlighting all these things is not going to help. My biggest peeve is when advertising agencies, they go about using non-Indians for Indian themed ads. It just brings about the question as to why are we that behind the shadows that you cannot see us, but you can see our culture, you can appreciate the Bollywood culture, everything has Bollywood in it. You want the culture but you don't want us. This is the kind of argument that leads to a lot of anger and hate, and this is something we need to acknowledge. And how do we need to talk about, and how do we do it? Acknowledge that there are real issues, and to address this we need a lot of representation, we need a lot of people to talk about it. Don't just use it as fodder for things that would progress your agenda, because that would further divide, and that's not going to help.
Okay, thanks, Iswari. Let's go to, maybe you can go Pravin and then Ron.
Okay, what can we do as a society, country to address? I think when it comes to the media, I just want to quickly point out here, I'm a big follower of the Malaysian Tamil music scene. I even have a blog which I write about it sometimes. I don't do it so often these days, but most of the songs or most of the music videos being produced by the community itself, by these Malaysian Indian talents, has been towards violence or gangsterism. So sometimes people who consume this, they say that most Indians are gangsters and all that, right? So what can be done as a society? I think we need a lot of the Malaysian Indian music scene, especially the Malaysian Tamil music scene, is actually really huge, and it has a lot of connection to India, to Tamil Nadu as well. So we need our talents to come out with contents that actually can resonate with the wider Malaysian community. Exploring but really good positive messages, and I think this is what Jaga did really well. And it had this Indian consciousness, and it brought that to light. So I'm going to also end with what you brought up earlier, Jason. You talked about Kisona, how she was verbally abused on social media, and I think that is what most non-Indians have. They think that Malaysians are from the estate, they are uneducated, they do not have the schemata they don't have the tools to navigate life. And I think this is a big problem that Malaysian Indians face generally. So I think that's from me, Jason.
Right. Thank you, Pravin. And last but not least, Ron, go ahead and close us off.
Yeah, I think just to summarize what they are saying in a sense is that I think Malaysians need to learn to decolonize. And this is a big term, and I don't mean decolonizing from white supremacy, but also from the other forms of supremacy that exist today. And I think the most prevailing one is Malay supremacy, because it really, really strikes a chord with every structure that we navigate in life. So when I wrote my thesis, I called it the double colonization of Malaysian Indian men, but I don't think it's double anymore as I navigate through my postdoctoral work, my postgraduate, sorry. And I always think that it's not just double colonization, but it's coming into quadruple, because there's so many layers to navigate. So I think that at the end, how can non-Malaysian Indians be good allies is to speak up even when we don't ask. You need to be there for us. Don't allow abuse, don't allow violence in your own communities to take place when it's going to be against us. And also to do a lot of reading. Like, I think reading culture is something really lacking. Access to books, affordable books, let's put it that way. Books these days are nothing, less than 40 ringgit. I think the government needs to figure it out how we can get books into libraries. Public spaces are definitely needed. We need more public spaces, not malls. We need more parks and libraries where people can actually sit and congregate and read and be collective. And that natural integration will be so beautiful, not something forced. It doesn't need to be a subject in university like hubungan ethnic, because that's all exam based, right? So we need something very natural, very organic for these kind of changes to take place. It is a long ride, but I hope I'm alive to see it, because I don't know. Things are so murky, but let's have some hope for the day eventually.
Right. Thank you, Ron. We are at the end of our session. For teachers tuning in, do fill in and submit the feedback and attendance form. You'll be able to receive a certificate of attendance for the session. To our speakers, thank you so much, Srisari, Ron, and Pravin, for spending the hour with us and for sharing your labor with everyone here attending. To all of our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you managed to take away a piece of learning and hopefully a plan for action from today's session. My name is Jason. Thank you for watching and have a great day ahead of you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.